Wheeling, Illinois, a quiet suburb just outside Chicago. It was here that Charlie Kirk grew up, an ordinary teenager with an extraordinary ambition. Unlike many of today's political leaders, Charlie didn't have family ties to Washington. No Ivy League pedigree, no powerful connections waiting for him. What he did have was a belief that America's college campuses were under siege by liberal ideology, and someone needed to fight back. In 2012, at just 18 years old, he founded Turning Point USA, starting small with little more than a laptop, determination, and a vision to reshape America's youth. But here's where the story takes a surprising turn. Within months, this teenager from the suburbs found himself in the orbit of America's wealthiest conservative power brokers, billionaires, megadonors, and political kingmakers, individuals who saw in Kirk the perfect voice to carry their message into the next generation. With their funding, Turning Point USA exploded, transforming from a small student group into a multi-million-dollar political machine. Kirk's message was amplified on campuses, at massive conventions, and eventually, across the internet. By his early 20s, Charlie Kirk was no longer a student activist. He was a regular face on Fox News, a rising star at CPAC, and a trusted ally of Donald Trump himself. His new organization, Turning Point Action, even began influencing elections directly. From a quiet Illinois suburb to the White House lawn, Charlie Kirk's rise was meteoric. But the question remains, was it the story of one man's ambition, or the carefully crafted project of powerful hidden hands? In the early 2000s, Charlie Kirk was just another teenager in Wheeling, Illinois. No political dynasty, no Ivy League background. Just a young man with a restless drive, and a dream to make his voice heard. In 2012, at just 18 years old, he launched Turning Point USA, a fledgling student group with no office, no staff, and almost no funding. On paper, it looked impossible, but Kirk had something most young activists didn't, an uncanny ability to network. Within months, he was shaking hands with some of the wealthiest conservative donors in America. At conferences and closed-door gatherings, the young activist pitched his vision to challenge liberal dominance on college campuses, and it worked. Billionaire backers like Foster Friess, the Koch network, and later, the Mercer family, opened their checkbooks. What began as a grassroots dream quickly transformed into a well-funded machine. Money poured into Turning Point USA, millions of dollars in just a few short years. With this backing, Kirk leapt from the suburbs into the national spotlight. He built a digital empire, dominated college campuses, and soon became a fixture at the Conservative Political Action Conference CPAC. By his early 20s, Charlie Kirk was no longer a curious outsider. He was now one of the most visible faces of young conservatism, bolstered by powerful patrons who had invested in him as the future of the movement. But here's the mystery: did Kirk rise on his own ambition? Or was his journey carefully engineered by the very donors who saw in him the perfect messenger for their hidden agenda? In rooms like this, the future of movements is often decided before the world even hears about them. Charlie Kirk arrived on the scene as a teenager with a message, but messages need fuel. That fuel often comes from money, from a handful of very wealthy backers who saw an opportunity to shape the next generation. Take the Mercer family, Robert and Rebecca Mercer. From hedge fund fortunes to political media investments, the Mercers are known for placing high-stakes bets on people and platforms that can move public opinion. Investigations and reporting over the years have tied them to a constellation of conservative projects, media outlets, strategists, and activists, the sort of network that can lift a young firebrand into the national spotlight. Then there are donors like Foster Friess, a businessman who became a familiar name in Republican donor circles. Known for backing socially conservative candidates and causes, donors of this stripe see student organizing not as an academic exercise, but as an investment in future voters and leaders. And across the other side of the conservative spectrum sits the Koch network, a sprawling, decades-long operation focused on building free market, libertarian infrastructure. Unlike one-off checks, the Koch approach is methodical, funds for think tanks, campus programs, and networks that incubate young activism over years. When these forms of money and influence converge, sometimes directly, sometimes through intermediary groups and donor-advised funds, the result is rapid scale. Cash pays for staff, travel, conventions, glossy digital campaigns, and legal teams. It builds chapters on campus overnight and buys the visibility that turns a local organizer into a national figure. For Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA, that influx of resources helped move him from a student activist to a recurring presence at CPAC, on cable news, and on the national stage. Was this the rise of a single charismatic leader, or the deliberate cultivation of a messenger by powerful hands? The ledger tells part of the story. The rest is left to the headlines, the filings, and the questions that still linger. Money talks, but sometimes it whispers, through redactions, pass-throughs, and blank from lines that leave more questions than answers. Turning Point USA grew fast, and growth needs resources. Over the years, public records and reports have shown millions of dollars flowing into TPUSA and its affiliated entities. But not all of that money is easy to trace. Here's how the blur happens. Donor-advised funds enable wealthy individuals to make large donations to charities without their names appearing on public filings. 501c4 groups, social welfare nonprofits, can spend on political activity without fully disclosing donors. And sometimes money moves through limited liability companies or intermediary organizations that hide the source. When those channels are used together, millions can arrive, and the paper trail grows thin. Public filings can show large donations and sudden spikes in spending, conference budgets, digital ad buys, travel for campus teams, yet the who behind the check is often missing, listed only as a donor-advised fund, a shell entity, or a redacted line item. When those millions arrive, they buy scale, staff, events, viral content, years of campus organizing. What looks like instant grassroots can be the result of well-funded campaigns launched overnight. For viewers, the effect is the same. A movement appears, loud and visible. For investigators, the questions remain: who funded it, and why? A program line, a number, a redaction. The accounting tells part of the story. Millions were spent to build influence. The rest, the sources, the motives, are often kept in the dark. And in the world of politics, darkness shapes narratives as surely as light. Money doesn't always announce itself. It passes through doors that close behind it. If you want to know who's pulling the levers, you follow the dollars, and you pry open the redactions. That's where the real story begins. Public filings confirm the millions flowing in, but they don't always reveal the hand that writes the checks. And this is where the story turns darker. Some reports suggest that shadowy dark money groups help sustain TPUSA's rapid growth, organizations designed to move funds while keeping donor identities hidden. These groups operate under legal structures like 501c4 nonprofits. Unlike charities, they're not required to disclose who's funding them. That means millions can move across the chessboard without ever revealing who's really playing the game. With these funds, Turning Point's influence spreads, new chapters, louder rallies, bigger platforms. To the public, it looks like grassroots energy, but behind the curtain, the money trail tells a different story. Are these rallies the product of student passion, or the strategy of unseen donors using shadow networks to shape the next generation? The truth may lie somewhere in the redacted lines. From lecture halls to student unions, Turning Point USA dominates America's campuses. With flashy events, social media influencers, and a war chest of outreach dollars, their presence is hard to ignore. This isn't just grassroots activism, it's a coordinated campaign complete with touring speakers, professional media crews, and budgets that rival established political organizations. Influencers amplify the message online, while rallies on the ground create a sense of unstoppable momentum. But how does a student movement afford the kind of production value usually reserved for national campaigns? The answer lies in the millions of dollars behind the scenes. Outreach budgets, corporate-style marketing, and celebrity appearances don't come cheap. They come from deep pockets donors and networks determined to shape the next generation's politics. What looks like student energy may in fact be the product of a carefully engineered machine, one that is rewriting the culture of America's campuses, chapter by chapter. Not everyone sees Turning Point US as a free speech movement. In fact, critics have raised sharp accusations, spreading disinformation, stoking culture wars, and acting less as an independent voice, and more as a political puppet. Some argue TPUSA thrives not by fostering open dialogue, but by amplifying division. Their rallies spotlight hot-button culture war issues, turning campuses into political battlegrounds. The louder the fight, the stronger the headlines. And here's the controversy. Critics claim TPUSA is less about protecting free speech, and more about consolidating influence for the wealthy donors who sustain it. Supporters say it's student empowerment. Detractors say it's political puppeteering, a movement that answers not to students, but to financiers with long-term agendas. So is TPUSA a beacon of free expression, or a megaphone for hidden interests? The answer depends on who you believe, the students on the ground or the critics behind the curtain. Charlie Kirk presents himself as the voice of a generation, a young leader rising to defend free speech, liberty, and America's future. But critics ask, is he truly the architect of this movement, or just the chosen face of a much bigger, hidden agenda? A stage can spotlight a leader, but it can also mask the hands behind the curtain. Hands that provide the money, the strategy, and the reach while the frontman delivers the message. Turning Point USA's meteoric rise from a laptop in Illinois to a nationwide empire was fueled by more than student enthusiasm. It was fueled by networks, donors, and resources that remain partly hidden from view. So when you hear Charlie Kirk's voice echo across campuses and television screens, ask yourself, is this the story of one man's ambition, or the design of something far larger? In just a decade, Charlie Kirk went from a suburban teenager in Illinois to one of the most influential conservative voices in America. But behind the story of a young activist lies something far bigger, a political machine fueled by billionaire donors, secretive networks, and culture war tactics that dominate America's campuses. Tonight, we ask, is Charlie Kirk the architect of this movement, or just the chosen face of a hidden agenda? Kirk wasn't a star athlete, he wasn't headed to the Ivy League. But what he did have was ambition and a knack for networking. As a teenager, he wrote about liberal bias in schools. The piece caught the attention of conservative talk shows, and soon, Charlie Kirk had a platform. From there, doors opened. He rubbed shoulders with wealthy conservative backers, men like Foster Friess, who wrote some of his very first checks. That early seed money would grow into something far larger. Turning Point USA, founded in 2012, didn't rise on student enthusiasm alone. It rose on money, and lots of it. The Mercer family, who once bankrolled Breitbart. Foster Friess, the millionaire investor, connections to the vast Koch network. With their support, TPUSA ballooned from a two-person startup into a national powerhouse. By 2020, TPUSA reported tens of millions in revenue, but not all of it is clear. Some reports suggest shadowy dark money groups help sustain its rapid growth, money rooted through nonprofits and foundations where donor identities remain hidden. To supporters, it's a patriotic movement. To critics, it's a well-funded political machine designed to shape young voters long before they step into the ballot box. On campuses across the country, TPUSA is everywhere. Branded tents, flashy events, celebrity speakers, and an army of influencers. This isn't grassroots, it's a campus takeover, powered by multi-million-dollar outreach budgets. Every rally, every Instagram post, every free t-shirt isn't just about student engagement. It's about building an empire of influence. Yet with its growth comes controversy. Critics accuse TPUSA of spreading disinformation, stoking culture wars, and reducing free speech to a political weapon. They argue it's less about empowering students, and more about consolidating power for the donors who fund it. To some, it's student activism. To others, it's political puppeteering.
Not counting gang violence. Great.